Brian Todd, thank you very much. With that development, ISIS, meanwhile, also tonight threatening to execute 2 hostages in hours. Fewer than 30 hours remain until ISIS terrorists say they will kill the 2 Japanese men there unless they receive $200 million in ransom. Will Ripley is out front. And Will, you've been seeing this, obviously, also through the eyes of the Japanese media. The big question is, the United States has said they should not pay. They should not pay. Will the Japanese pay ransom?
Well, the fact that the Japanese government is now publicly saying that they want to open a line of communication with ISIS indicates that at least they're willing to sit down at the table and talk. Japan, unlike the United States, is not entirely against the idea of paying ransom. Even though no ransom has ever been officially paid for the release of a hostage here, there is speculation that in a previous incident with hostages in Iraq that there was a deal worked out under the table. So perhaps, Aaron, the Japanese government at this point is willing to at least talk to ISIS. Of course, a $200 million figure is totally unrealistic, and that would not happen. The question is, what would the Japanese government be willing to give, if anything, and what would ISIS be willing to take?
That obviously is a crucial question. Of course, there have been reports from some we've spoken to that, France has paid up to $18 million to free journalists from ISIS. So there is a precedent for paying. Out front tonight, Philip Alboni, the president and CEO of the news website Global Post. His reporter, James Foley, of course known to all of you, was held hostage and executed by ISIS in August. And Tim Clemente, a former FBI counterterrorism agent. Tim, I want to start with you just because there's a couple things that are really different about this situation. At least it stood out to me. One of them, this is the first time ISIS has said, we want the ransom and here's a deadline. We've literally gotten, the Japanese have been very specific. 12:50 a.m. Eastern time is when they think this expires. ISIS before said, we'll kill if you don't, but there was not a deadline. So why do you think there's been a change in tactic to something so specific?
I think it gives them a PR coup. First of all, it creates pressure on the Japanese government. It makes ISIS look like they're the stronger negotiator in this. If the Japanese sit down and literally negotiate with ISIS over that $200 million amount, they're trying to beg and plead for ISIS to have mercy on the Japanese government and reduce the amount to make it affordable. And ISIS giving the timeline now just shows, look, we're the ones that lead this bargaining table. You come to us and we'll dictate whether or not we allow our terms to change. It's a power position, obviously. And
it seems to, perhaps that is working. I mean, Phil, other countries pay ransom. As I mentioned, France. James Foley, of course, as you know, tragically was killed by ISIS, was beheaded. 4 French journalists were reportedly with him when he was being held captive. France, according to many reports, they've never confirmed it, the government itself, but France reportedly paid up to $18 million. At least one German magazine reported that number. So do you believe that ransom could work? Would it have worked for James Foley? Would it have saved him?
Well, Aaron,
I think so. We've seen, it wasn't just the French, Aaron, it was Italians, German, Spanish, and Danish. All of those hostages were brought back and are safe in their homes tonight. And while it is not entirely clear that a ransom was paid in every case, we know from our own investigation that in most cases a ransom was paid. And just recently 2 Italian aid workers were freed by ISIS. And the Italian government has said a ransom was not paid. That may be true, that may not be true. But what is clear is that the Islamic State wants to rid themselves, if you will, of these hostages. And there is a means to that end.
And to that point, Tim, I'm curious, because one thing that we had heard was that they were, quote unquote, running out of hostages, right? That these beheading videos have helped them. They have helped them recruit. It certainly helps them with some, that it appears that they have the same guy and the same voice standing there threatening this time, that the West and America have failed to take this guy out. But why then would they take out 2 at the same time? If Western hostages, or, obviously in this case Japanese, are so valuable, they don't have that many of them, why would you kill 2 at the same time?
Well, I think they're using the 2 because I think they're trying to use leverage against the Japanese government. The Japanese government has offered $200 million to support the anti-ISIS efforts, not directly in combat in any way, but to support the efforts against them. I think the ISIS members that have these two hostages, they're realizing, look, this is a one-time play. Let's throw the same number back at them, the 200 million. And it becomes a lose-lose situation for Japan. They cannot win in this. Either they pay and do what the Iraqi government considers to be financial support of terrorism by paying ransoms, or they let their citizens die. They cannot win in this. ISIS, no matter what, comes out the stronger and more powerful force in this.
And Phil, your bottom line is that the stance the U.S. government has taken, that not everyone in this country agrees with, but certainly plenty do, is that you don't pay terrorists, you don't give them money, no matter what, because it encourages them, it gives them financial wherewithal. But you're saying no, it wouldn't matter. It's okay to pay ransom.
That question was to me, Erin?
Yes, Phil, to you.
I think the public policy of not paying a ransom is fine. I think it's probably the right thing, but there needs to be a much more nuanced approach. And I think our policy for dealing with hostages is a failed policy, and I think the facts speak for themselves. Jim Foley, Stephen Sotloff lost their lives. There's a young American woman, I believe you've talked about her on your program before.
Yes.
17 months in captivity, still being held by the Islamic State, and Jim Foley's traveling companion, John Cantley, still being held by the Islamic State after more than 2 years. I think there's two things that need to happen. One, the government needs to open up a line of communication with the kidnappers to try to resolve the case. And I think the families of the hostages need to be permitted to do what they feel is best. And if that is a ransom payment, and that was certainly true with the Foleys, and I know the family of the young woman whose name has not been revealed, and they wish to pay a ransom. But it's not easy to find $3 and $5 million. No. But the families need to be empowered and not impeded in having the opportunity to bring their loved ones home.
All right, well, thanks very much to both of you.